Good afternoon, or whatever time it is where you are when you're looking at this. So we're going to talk about risk, and risk is a major subject in Chapter 9. Okay? We will talk about the whole of Chapter 9, all of Chapter 9, but we are specifically looking at, on this video, risk. Now what is risk? It's a negative concept, and it's the chance that something will go wrong. That's what risk is. Auditors face and have to assess several kinds of risk, and we're going to look at these different kinds of risk. This assessment determines the nature, how we do it, timing, when we do it, and extent, how much work we have to do, done by the auditor. The first risk that we're going to look at is inherent risk, and it's noted as IR. Inherent risk is defined as the risk that an account or segment of a financial environment will have a material misstatement. The assessment is directly related to errors and is not controllable by the auditor and disregards any controls that an account might have. Material misstatement means a significant error. Material misstatement, significant error. Not controllable means that whatever is in the environment that's what it is. The auditor has no control over it. The auditor assesses what's in the environment and deals with it. So if we are looking at different accounts, so let's say we were comparing cash to fixed assets, which of these accounts do you think would have the higher inherent risk? Okay, answers. Cash certainly has a higher inherent risk than fixed assets because cash is easily stolen as compared to fixed assets. There's extensive controls over cash. There's banks, there's checks, there's reconciliations, keep it in a safe. Fixed assets, there aren't those kinds of controls. But these controls are ignored when we assess inherent risk for these accounts. So what you'll find is that there's much more work done on cash than there is on fixed assets, even if fixed assets are a greater amount. There's a lot of work that's done on cash. If the auditor feels that an account has a high inherent risk, his strategy would be to have a high inherent risk. There's a bigger chance of a material misstatement. Therefore, the auditor would do more work. Inherent risk is high. The amount of work that we do also goes up. That's inherent risk. We look at the second risk. Second risk is control risk, and that's noted as CR. And that's defined as the risk that the internal control will not detect the errors. And management puts internal controls into place to detect errors. The assessment of this risk by the auditor is a determination of the quality of internal control. This risk is not controllable by the auditor. What that means is that whatever internal controls there are in the system are the internal controls that are in the system, and those are the ones that the auditor will deal with. The risk is assessed on a continuum from 0%, no risk, to 100%, all risk. 0% is perfect, no risk, all errors are detected. 100% is the worst, no controls, all errors are missed. Perfect, do you think that exists? That there would be a situation where there'd be no risk at all errors, every single error would be detected? No, not at all. If there was a system like that, it would be so expensive that it would be the cost-benefit ratio would be out of sight. 100% is the worst, which means no controls. All errors are missed. You think there's a system like that where there's no internal control? Absolutely. Small companies that are not run very well, wind up with no internal controls. You'll learn in this says chapter 10, it's really chapter 11, how the auditor assesses control risk. If the auditor assesses that an account has a high control risk, meaning internal controls are not good, their strategy would be to do more work. Control risks are high, go up. The amount of work that the auditor does goes up. So this too is a direct relationship. Third risk that we talk about is acceptable audit risk, and that's designated by AAR, and that's defined as the risk that the auditor is willing to take. And we see this word willing, this phrase willing to take, that means that there are controls. The auditor can determine what that risk should be, that the financials are not fairly stated after the auditor has stated that they are. In other words, there is a false positive concerning the fair presentation of the financial statements. Okay? False positive meaning, I've done my work, I've given an opinion that the financial statements are presented fairly, and in fact they aren't. False positive. This risk, on the other hand, is totally controllable by the auditor and is determined by the type of client and the potential for legal liability. Type of client meaning, is it a SEC client? Is it a private client? Is it a big company? Is it a small company? And what is the potential for me, if I screw this up, getting sued? If the auditor lowers this risk, meaning there's a high risk, there's a sensitive kind of client, meaning like an SEC client, high risk of legal liability, meaning we have a good chance of being sued, then we want to do what to the risk? We want to lower that risk. We want to lower AAR. And if we lower AAR, it means we have more work to do. So the relationship between AAR and work is an inverse relationship. If we put all this together, it becomes what's called the audit risk model. And it shows the relationship between these previously discussed risks and the evidence that's gathered. IR, CR divided by AAR equals the amount of work. W equals work. This is a mathematical representation. Numbers can be put in here, but what this really does is just give you a sense of the relationship between each of these items and the amount of work. Inherent risk goes up, work goes up. Control risk goes up, the amount of work goes up. AAR goes up, the amount of work goes down. Okay? And each of these risks are independent of one another. They're independent variables, just independent of one another. The only thing that's in this relationship that's dependent is the amount of work. This is the dependent variable, dependent on these items. Okay, so this is all we have to say about risk.